Hi, this is Omar, and we're here at C2E2 talking to the legendary Chris Claremont.
The Dark Phoenix saga is 40 years ago.
We just read it. These ladies just read it for the first time.
It doesn't have a happy ending.
Okay.
That'll teach her to wear the really sexy black dress. If she'd worn the white dress, the Sentinels would have missed her. We were trying for a metaphor. I mean, in the original draft of 137, she doesn't die. They just drain all the power and throw it out the window, and Jean returns to Earth slightly lobotomized, which is how Scott loves her. And
That's love.
a wife who doesn't argue, or a girlfriend who doesn't argue. And the splash page of the next issue is this beautiful shot of Scott standing over Jean, who's kneeling down in a very respectable skirt because it's below the knees, which is pretty daring for 1975, and dipping her hand in the water, like, oh, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then Jim Shooter pointed out, you really can't let someone kill 7+ billion people and get away with a slap on the wrist, which wouldn't have been a problem if someone had raised this question before the book was about to go to press. So we thought we'd had approvals all up and down the line, and we got surprised by the fact that, oops, we didn't. So we had two options. Either she goes to jail for the rest of her life, which of course meant the next 10 years of X-Men would have been, we have to rescue Jean, we work up a plan to rescue Jean, we go and rescue Jean, the Shi'ar chase us across the galaxy, they bust us, we go to jail, she goes to jail, we break free, she breaks free, they chase us across the galaxy, we get away, they take her back, we try to free her, we fail, we enlist allies, we try to fail, then we free her. And the problem from my perspective as the writer was I felt we were done, time to move on to the next story. And deep down inside, I was going, Jim has a point. So I went home with a bottle of bourbon and said, fuck it, we'll kill her.
What kind of bourbon?
Jim Beam.
Well,
Bean. And that's why I don't drink anymore. The beauty of it was because John, we literally put the last 5 pages together basically 5 days before the book went to press. We got it done, we sent it out, and there was no social media and no print media. No one saw this coming. They figured, well, it'll be the usual, there'll be a get out of jail free card at the end, and suddenly, nope, she'd be dead. And then the next issue, to convince everyone, we buried her. And it was like, oh my God! And from my perspective, it was the best storytelling moment we had, because from that point on, no one could trust us. I do covers where we did it to Jean. Will we do it to Dum Dum Dum?
I remember that with Kitty Pryde and Rogue and Oro.
Yeah. So I wanted that guarantee to be there, and we got away with it for 3 years, and then X Factor came along, and it was funny, Ann Nocenti and Barry Windsor Smith and I were getting together to plot out what became X-Men 198, which was the second part of the Storm saga, and Life Death. And as it turned out, Barry artistically turned in one of the most brilliant issues ever. But Ann starts out, Chris, I've got something to tell you. Oh, what, Ann? They're putting together a book called X Factor, and the original X-Men are in it, and they're resurrecting Jean. And I sat there for like about 2 minutes, and I said, excuse me. Got up, ran back to the office, which was around the corner, and unfortunately it was Friday, the office was closed, Jim wasn't answering his mobile, and, oh wait, they didn't have mobiles back then, sorry. Other than the big suitcase that Danny Glover was carrying around, Lethal Weapon.
Oh yeah.
3.
Trunk of the car.
And they turned off the elevator, so I couldn't, everybody had gone home for the weekend, so I went back And after I stopped fuming, we plotted the story. But I came in Monday with my alternative, which was like, okay, if you want to reboot the original X-Men, A, we just married Scott a year ago, and B, oh, remember 6 weeks ago we just had Scott and Madeline have their baby. And what you're going to tell me that Scott's going to dump his wife and infant child for his old girlfriend, and one, she's going to take it, much less the other three members of the team? So I didn't think that was a viable start to a, it's hard to stay a hero when you really step on that landmine. So my alternative was, okay, look, you want to reform the team? Bingo. Scott is called back to active service, so to speak. So he goes back. And Madeline, because she's Mrs. Scott, goes with him. And you basically have the quintessential, my husband's on active service, going back to serve, and I'm sitting at home with a kid, scared shitless. If that isn't primal conflict, you got it. And, oh my gosh, that means Bobby and Hank and Warren can step forward because you don't have the Scott Jean riff anymore. They can go center stage. Oh, and you need a Gray? We have a Gray, her sister.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. Jean, you have a sister? Mwahaha. Who has a mutant power. What is her mutant power? She detects and catalyzes mutants. She's a living Cerebro. So she goes in, she zaps someone, they turn into their superpower, you have a conflict for an issue, and it's resolved. Or it goes wrong and the kid stays a mutant, a superpowered evil mutant forever, in which case she has guilt. Perfect. Well, that wasn't the sales hook for X Factor. The sales hook for X Factor was Jean comes back. And Jim liked the idea, but he'd already made a commitment to everybody else. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So whose idea was it to put her at the bottom of the sea then? That wasn't, you guys didn't, it wasn't a...
No, she was dead.
Yeah.
She were dead, top down, inside and out. Which, of course, led to the interesting question, if she's dead, where the hell did Rachel come from? But I know the answer to that. It was a question Rachel asked a lot, too. But, that was my problem, because after all those years, I kept thinking the X-Men were mine, not Marvel's. And that didn't go over well.
17 years is a long time, though.
Yeah, but...
You were the X-Men. It didn't matter what else happened.
Let me put it in another 17-year... Roughly 17 years ago, a struggling writer named Rowling wrote this book, sold this book, and she's now, a triple billionaire?
Yeah.
And the same, I've known George Martin for
You guys wrote a book together, didn't you?
No.
Oh, no, Lucas, sorry.
No, George Martin. Yeah, Lucas and I wrote, yeah. No, I've known George for a hell of a long time. And then he wrote, he spent 15 years writing Game of Thrones, and ba-bing. So
he was a big comic book fan because he wrote in letters.
Still is.
Still is?
Yeah. It's all right. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan.
Yeah, I think most of us are, yeah.
Yeah.
Who's going to be sitting at the throne, Chris?
What makes you think there will be a throne?
It's a good question. Is that the way you would end it? How would you end Game of Thrones? I'm sorry, Song of...
No idea. That's George's game. And actually, the series has gone beyond the books, so... Boy, some people are going to be pissed. But, no, the point is, though, that Hogwarts is hers. Thrones is his. X-Men is Marvel's.
But I think when most people think of X-Men, though, they think of your huge run. Because you did so much with these characters. This line that got canceled and got revamped, right? You were Wolverine. You were Storm. It doesn't matter if those characters, well, not Storm, but those characters were created before you came around. You put the voice in them. You made Storm who she was. You made Rogue who she was. You saved Miss Marvel, from wherever Marvel was going to put her. Carol Danvers was gone. And you got her out. You made her binary. You made her a badass. If it wasn't for you, well, I don't know where she'd be
On the
now.
other hand, the two ladies who created Captain Marvel are where she'd be now. That's why they get a bigger credit up in the middle of the credits, and I'm down with everybody else at the bottom. Which is that's the way the business runs, and that's not a problem. It's good for her.
How was it to see your creations on the big screen though, like Rogue, the first time you saw X-Men? And I know you made a cameo in a couple of them. You did Days of Future Past
and X3.
You had a voice and you had a line in Days of Future Past.
Actually, I had 3 lines, and I made more money from my SAG contract than I did as the writer of the source material. In terms of the adaptation. No. In terms of the screen adaptation.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. Yeah. So how was that the first time you saw these characters on the big screen?
Well, I mean, come on. You're asking, how do I feel about Hugh Jackman playing one of my characters? About Patrick Stewart playing Xavier? About
Right.
Anna Paquin and Ian McKellen. Jesus. Yeah. I mean, not only Ian McKellen, but Michael Fassbinder and James McAvoy. The casting, Lauren Shuler Donner's casting of the X canon from beginning to end has been brilliant. I mean, I have no problem with any of that. The joke I was telling myself is, not joke, but my wish, if only Joni and Stan had been around at the Oscars this year.
Oh, I know.
Can you imagine when they were nominated for Best Picture, you have Black Panther, and why don't we just have everybody here who's been in a Marvel movie come up on stage and give a shout out to Stan and Joni? And the camera, my fantasy is the camera pans across the ground floor of the auditorium in LA, and nobody's there except Stan and Joni, because they're all on stage because everybody's been in a Marvel movie.
Sure.
And because I think that is the cool thing that Kevin Feige has brought to the equation. You look at the DC movies, and Wonder Woman was excellent. Justice League was a movie. Batsuit was very long. Even in Joss Whedon's version, as opposed to that was Justice League. Yeah, it all blurs together after a while. But no, I mean, there is no comparison. You just look at the way Kevin has woven together the Marvel Universe and pulled these elements out of the Marvel Universe and then cast the living daylights out of the characters. I mean, you look at Robert Downey Jr. over the last 8 films and it's like, wow. You look at Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth, and I mean, there's the all Chris squad, myself included. It's just breathtaking. I think Captain Marvel is a worthy addition to that arc. And as a fanboy, purely as a fanboy, I'm sort of sitting on the edge of my seat wondering, okay, now you've got the two A franchises back from Fox. What are you going to do next?
God. Man, I am so excited for that.
Well, it's like my childish wish fulfillment is at the end of, I have 2 scenes that if I could, I would throw into Infinity Wars 2, which is in the middle of the battle in Act 2. The Avengers are getting their ass kicked. Thanos is just beating up, down, and sideways. And then out of the blue of the western sky comes this tall, lanky Canadian who just charges in there, pops the claws, and then slash. And the gauntlet goes flying. And Thanos just and punches. And you see Wolverine shooting up into outer space at escape velocity. And, one Avenger says, "Who the hell was that?" And Captain Marvel says, "Screw that, grab the glove." And the tide begins to turn. And then you get to the end, and you run through all the credits, and then you get to the SAG credit and all the industry credits, and suddenly a phone starts ringing. Bring, bring, bring. And you're, what the heck is that? Screen goes black, and you're hearing the phone, and suddenly light comes on, and you're in this glorious apartment, looking out the window, and in the background is Boston, because Carol is from Boston. And you hear, and there's a phone on the table in the foreground, and it just keeps ringing. And in walks Carol, Brie Larson. I wish with the Captain Marvel haircut as opposed to the Infinity Wars haircut, which is never mind, but that's just me. But she walks in, picks up the phone, and you hear Patrick Stewart go, "Carol?" And she looks at the phone and grins and goes, "Charles?" And looks out of the camera and goes, "Charles?" Cut to black. they're back.
I'm so glad as fans we're not the only ones that are daydreaming these things all day. I'm glad.
What makes you think I'm not a fan?
Well, I mean, like people that haven't professionally written comic books and things like that. Which
I remember the first day, and I still have the first issue I bought in high school, walking home from school and ducking into the newsagent coffee shop. And what was on the news, the rack was a copy of FF48.
That was your first issue of comic book?
Well, my first issue of Stan's comic books. I grew up reading English comic books.
Oh, okay.
Eagle. Dan Dare, Sky Pilot of the Spaceways, that sort of thing, which was effing brilliant. I found American comics just, ugh. No, I'd read them when I got my hair cut, and it was just uninteresting. But then I picked up FF48, and it was The Watcher, and it was Stan and Jack hitting their stride at the top of their career, and it was like, wow, this is cool. What happens next? Well, next was, the Silver Surfer, and next was Galactus, and wow, this is really cool. And then at the end of the Galactus story, what happens? Johnny Storm goes to college.
It was an ongoing saga.
Well, the point was, Stan's rule, which I learned, when I was working there right at the beginning, is one issue. Each story is one issue. The arc can be continuous. It's like you have continuity from issue to issue, but each story is one issue. If it's really good, you can do a two-parter. But if you want to go longer than two-parter, you better have the coming of Galactus.
Things are so different these days.
Well, you better end it with like Johnny going to college. But the whole point with Stan was each issue is some new reader's story. So you have to establish everything. If you notice watching TV, something as classic as NCIS or Law and Order or whatever, every episode, every character is introduced. They never assume that everybody has seen this. You always assume that someone's coming in out of left field, and they don't know who everybody is. They don't know that NCIS is a division of the Navy, Department of the Navy. They don't know who Gibbs is. They don't know who any of the supporting characters are. You've got to establish. And nowadays, sadly, the paradigm seems to be, we are doing trades, 5-part collections.
Right.
So you can establish it in the first part. You don't have to worry about it every issue. The problem is, if I don't find that arc on the newsstands and I pick it up with issue 3 and I don't know who anybody is and I don't know what the story is, I'm not going to pick up issue 4, and I'm not going to go back and try to find issue 1 and 2, and I'm not going to go buy the trade paperback. You've got to be aggressive and enthusiastic and assume if there's 300 million people in this country, I want them all reading my book. Right. And if there's 7 billion people in the world, that's an audience. And, if that works for JK and that works for George, why the hell can't it work for us in comics?
You've come back to X-Men, right?
Yeah, just
twice before. Twice before.
I think I'm out, they pulled me back in.
Okay, so the first time you came back was the Revolution thing during the 2000s, early aughts.
Well,
did it feel like coming back home? Like, how did you catch up? There wasn't Wikipedia.
No, the point was, when I came back in '98, I came back as management. Okay. I was vice president, editorial director, and what I said to Bob and when I was hired is, the one thing I will not do is X-Men. I don't want to go anywhere near that series. I haven't touched it. I haven't done anything to it in 5 years. I don't know who anybody is. No way, no how. For my sins, I got the FF, which was, I was happy as a clam. Me and Salva, we were off and running. It was, from my
I love that review.
It was the best.
Valeria.
Yeah.
Love that.
But, I did some fill-in work ghosting over Alan Davis art.
Oh, okay.
That's why they're uncredited. Because I didn't want my name on it.
Like during the 12 saga? Like all that? Right before you came on board full time?
What happened was they wanted to relaunch the series, and basically The disadvantage with being an employee, even if you're a boss, is somebody's higher than you on the totem pole, and they have to pull rank. So, oh, I didn't
know we needed it. We did. Oh, is it? Okay. Even for guests? Does it feel like going back home, writing X-Men again? Every time you go back?
No. Because it's not anywhere approaching my home. And oddly, intriguingly enough, all the stories I've been assigned in the last 6 months, have been spun off of stories I wrote back in the day. So the Nightcrawler story that I just wrote is set at the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is in the middle of the Crosstime Caper. So how do they get there, and what does it mean? Which is actually fun. The Kitty Wolverine story is set in the last 3 pages of the Kitty Wolverine miniseries.
Oh, that's right, yeah. The one you did back in the...
With Al Milgrom. Yeah. Well, everything I've done is back in the 80s.
And you were writing everything back then. Everything X-Men related. So I was really surprised not to see your name on X Factor at first. Because, you were doing Excalibur and you Mutants.
You're talking Kurt Busiek, John Byrne. There were a lot of committed personalities involved on the X Factor side of the equation.
I got you. Okay. Yeah,
and also...
we, as fans, we read a little bit of what happens, right, behind the scenes. You guys all know, and you remember things.
There is honestly a part of me that thinks, what if John had gotten his wish and I'd left and he'd taken over the X-Men? Well, 90% of the characters I created were created after I left, after that moment, when he left. So you could look down the entire panoply of mutant characters.
You wouldn't have Forge, who's one of the greatest.
You wouldn't have Forge, you wouldn't have Rogue. Actually, Rogue and Mystique would have been Avengers characters.
Oh, Mystique was well.
No, they were actually created in Ms. Marvel.
Yeah.
And if Ms. Marvel had stuck around, they would have stayed there. The only reason they came to the X-Men was that the books got canceled, and I didn't want to lose. I was enjoying the characters too much. Rogue was created in X-Men Annual 10. Avengers Annual 10. Sorry.
No, you know.
No, but I mean, but that's again the nature of the business. It's like, you turn right instead of left. All of John's work on the FF wouldn't have happened if he'd stayed on the X-Men.
There were some amazing stories
right.
that he did there.
It's like if Jack had stayed at Marvel and not gone to DC, there wouldn't be any New Gods.
That's right.
Which revolutionized DC then and now. Their storytelling. It's always a what if in comics, as much in the creative aspect of it as the publishing aspect of it.
There's a huge list of questions I have for you, but I'll ask the top. Like, was there ever a story that you wanted to tell that people were like, your editor or even your artists were like, no, hell no, Chris, we can't do that? And they had the final say because you were like, okay, well, I guess I won't do it.
Oh, you mean like the death of Wolverine and him coming back as Master Assassin of the Hand?
Yeah. I think somebody swiped that story from you already, though. But
no comment.
Was there any story that you wanted to tell throughout, like, your either X-Men or Fantastic Four, whatever comic book you worked on, that you wanted to tell that you were told no, like flat out, it's not happening?
Sure, lots of them.
Really?
Yeah. And then they got told by other people. Boy, am I being bitchy now? We should have stayed in the hotel. But that's not every story is right for that editor or that production schedule or the artist or whatever. I mean, the thing about coming up with ideas, especially in a field like comics, is that the ideas are all fungible. You adapt to the circumstance. You adapt to what the artist wants to. I mean, oddly enough, Frank Miller and I were talking about this just the other day, where we're driving from San Diego to Los Angeles after the Comic-Con, and I'm trying to persuade him to do the Wolverine miniseries. And
this is the original Wolverine miniseries that you guys did back in the early 80s.
And he didn't want to do like 4 issues of punching and hitting, and that's all right. I didn't want to do that. And he wanted to do character, and I wanted to do character, and he wanted to do Japan, and oddly enough, I wanted to do Japan. So we were remarkably in sync. But the point, from my perspective, was find out what the artist wants to do, and then figure out a really cool story that will energize him or her. And coincidentally, it worked even better with Wolverine because Frank and I were so simpatico in terms of what we liked and what we didn't like and what we wanted to do with the character and what we didn't want to do with the character. As an add-on to that, the 10-page Wolverine story that I just wrote that's drawn by Salvador La Roca, that'll be out in, I guess, June, is, I suspect, I hope, I think I'm right, the story no one ever thought could be told with Wolverine.
Really?
Oh yeah. I hope. I can't remember seeing it. I'm just having a good time, and I hope the audience likes the story as much as I did when I came up with the idea, but it goes in a direction with him that is totally consistent with the character, but totally off the radar in terms of what anyone's done with him up till now.
So all your years you wrote comic books, who was your favorite character to write?
The one I haven't written yet.
Damn, that's a good answer. I wasn't expecting that. I was going to geek out with you about Wolverine.
Wolverine's fun, but it's not like he hasn't been written by everybody, and everybody has their own opinion of who and what he is. I mean, the thing I find I always try to focus on is the line that I loved best about the first X-Men movie, where Hugh Jackman and Anna Paquin are driving down the road, and she just looks up at him and says, "Does it hurt?" And he looks at her, and he looks at his hand, and he looks at the road, and he just says, "Every time." And when we saw that we were at the screening, my wife started elbowing me in the hip because I was on my feet going, "Yes!" Because as far as I was concerned, whatever else you can say about that movie, Brian and Hugh got it. Yeah, Brian Singer and Hugh Jackman got it. That is Wolverine. Yeah. Does it hurt? Every time. And that's the thing that everyone tends to forget, is every time the claws come out, he's slicing, they're cutting through his body. And that hurts. It never stops hurting. Which is why, in my vision of him, the ideas, the moments when he pops the claws are few and far between, because to me that was the quintessential, like, oh God, now we're in for some shit moment. And to turn it into a situation where they come out instantly and he slashes up 500 people, and then, it's just, okay, so what?
No, I think you're right, though, because a lot of writers seem to write him like a shield, right? Oh, here's a bunch of guys with machine guns. Wolverine takes the lead, and he always ends up with like a lot of bullets. But, when you wrote him, it did feel like it hurt. And also, I'm not going to, Larry Hama as well. Like, you could read that, oh, shit, no, he is really getting hurt. Yeah. And he's not invulnerable. Now we got ridiculous things, like he could come back from the dead and come back from a single cell.
Well,
I
did that.
Oh, yeah, you did in the annual.
Yeah.
No, but now it's a real thing. Like, yeah, I know. Bad news.
No, it's just different.
Ridiculous.
Different writers, different generations, different editors, different perceptions of the character. I mean, that's both the exciting, potentially really cool aspect of a corporate-owned product, where you can have an infinite number of creators playing with it, bringing an infinite number of inspirations. Who knows? They might, they come up with something really cool that other people didn't think of. I didn't think of. So you keep trying until you get it right. The problem is that when you find someone who gets it right, 6 months later somebody new will come along and do something completely different. Back in the old days, Stan's fundamental publishing rule was, you are given these characters in trust. And when you're done, you got to put them back the way you found them. So
Yeah.
the next guy can come along and start with a clean slate.
So what character would you like to see first in the MCU now that we have the rights back from Fox? I say we like I own any stake in MCU. Who's the character you want to see? I know you said Wolverine, but that would be cool.
No, that's just that's just my fantasy about a toss-off for Infinity Wars. All this talk about Simon Kinberg with a budget of $200 million now doing reshoot after reshoot on Dark Phoenix, and all I could think of was like they were holding it back to June because they wanted to make sure the deal is finalized. Yes. And I thought, it would be such a gotcha if the reverse of what I said earlier about the Avengers, about Infinity War, if the add-in scenes were integrating Dark Phoenix into the Marvel Universe. If suddenly you had Carol showing up to deal with, maybe that explains where because this is set in the 90s. Mm-hmm. So, oh God, that would have been fun. No, I mean, the X-Men are up in space fighting Dark Phoenix, and then out of nowhere comes Captain Marvel to resolve the situation, because after all, Binary knows of all these guys. That would be ridiculous.
There you go. Marvel.
Well,
there's your pitch.
Well, who knows? I mean, it would be a cool gotcha surprise to integrate, again, the X-Men into the Marvel Universe. The only problem was if you do that, actually, since it's set in the 1990s, that gives the current Marvel Universe the opportunity to recast and reboot everything, except if they recast and reboot everything, they'd have to accept that all the original characters are now, it's Halle Berry and Famke and James Marsden and all the rest of it, which they might not want to do. They might want to just go back to the beginning again, as they were in the McAvoy run.
Oh, okay.
I mean, for me, I thought the cinematic mistake that was, I would have done it differently, is you take Days of Future. The problem I have with Apocalypse, and that I worry.
Problem with Apocalypse?
Well, the fundamental problem, which is, why do I give a damn about a movie set in 1988 when I know from the end of Days of Future Past that everybody's alive? Yeah. It's like, I would have thought, for me, it would have been much more fun, and this is me doing what comic book writers always do, which is spin everything. But you get to the end of Days of Future Past, and Wolverine sees Jean and walks over and says, "Jean!" And Scott, "Oh, you're alive, damn." And then Jean says, "And here's our daughter Rachel." And Sophie Turner walks out, and it's like, oh, okay. So then Apocalypse occurs 3 years later, and what you have is a reality where physically Patrick Stewart is Charles Xavier, but in his mind he's still James McAvoy. Not only that, James McAvoy with hair.
Oh, right.
Because it's cool. And so you just pick up from that point, and you take all the Kid Mutants we saw in the 1980s version and just plant them in the present. And as far as Quicksilver goes, he outruns time. He doesn't age; he just goes too fast. I mean, there are all sorts of ways you can weave around it.
But it's like your way around loopholes, like you have written comic books before.
Yeah, but the point here is that you wouldn't have Apocalypse going after Charlie, because Charlie's too old. He's going after Jean. So Jean's the one who's in danger. She's the one who is close to getting her head shaved. On the other hand, it's a new experience for Apocalypse because he's never been a woman before. What you have at the climax here, Jean's fighting for her life. The X-Men are fighting for her life. You'll have to figure out how to explain why you really can't use Ian McKellen anymore, impractically speaking, but that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
Or maybe not have Magneto in this at all, which would have been, I wouldn't have had a problem with that. Not, it wasn't the performance.
I get it.
It's just like
It's a little overdone.
well, it's too much of a great thing. But anyway, you've got the fight, but then to save the day, Sophie comes out and manifests. Oh, sorry, I forgot something. So you're getting to the end of Days of Future Past, and they run the credits. You get to the end of the credit, and Jean wakes up from a nightmare, and you see the nightmare. What's the nightmare? The last scenes of X3, where
The whole movie, the whole nightmare.
well, no, the whole, but
Except your son.
no. My scene sucked. But the last scenes where Wolverine kills, where Jean is Dark Phoenix and Wolverine kills her, and it's like she's going, "Fuck was that?" And then rushes into, and around her is crackling the Phoenix effect, and she rushes into Sophie's room, and it's crackling around her too. So what you end Days of Future Past with is the threat of something far more serious down the line waiting for Rachel. And then in Apocalypse you get there, and in that film she manifests the first manifestation of the Phoenix and hammers Lucifer, and as she's incinerating him at the end and saving her mom and all the rest of it, the energy bursts out of her, starts rocketing up through the galaxy, and if you really wanted to be self-indulgent, you would follow it, and you see it manifest into a physicality of Sophie Turner until it gets to the far end of the galaxy where it's hungry and it eats a star, and the star supernovas, and the planet's destroyed, and she destroys the starship, and the Shi'ar are suddenly, what the was that? And then you end the story. And then the next is Dark Phoenix, where the Shi'ar come back to find out what the heck's going on. And for those of you who've been paying attention, we can say, well, and if you don't think this is going to if you wonder if this is going to have a happy ending, all I have to do is refer you to Logan and the Westchester incident, where people died. And the question then becomes, who's going to die? But to me, that would have been a cool thing, because it would have had the audience sitting on the edge of their seat. And then you could basically, in the film, establish the younger generation of mutants who could be the next chapter of the film, because you'd be essentially saying to the X community, the X film community, just like the Avengers film community, time to move on. And, at which point I'd jump up with my outline treatment for Gambit, which Fox bought, but that idea.
Sorry.
And said, let's make this film and bring in the next generation. But the point is, you end on a note that has the audience on the edge of their seat, and then you find a way to move on.
Yeah, you've always been a master of the long game, planning way ahead and laying the seeds down. And
but what is writing if not a long game? I mean, I want you to come back for more.
I do. I always want to come back for more.
You want to get the audience geared up and excited and going, holy cow, this is cool. What the heck happens next? And, I mean, it's like my other fantasy is, because way back in the day when Stan and I were pitching to Jim Cameron, we want another dimensional X-Men. We were pitching the X-Men to him, and he was going to pitch Catherine Bigelow to us. And I'm sitting there thinking, holy cow, Catherine Bigelow. And I got a series with a whole bunch of kick-ass women and, alpha people. And this could be so much fun. And I was sitting there thinking, I'll move to California. It's not like I have anything to do in New York other than write. And just take notes. I figured. And then Stan said, I hear you like Spider-Man. And Cameron's, his eyes lit up. And he started, the two of them just started bouncing ideas back and forth. And within 3 minutes, Cameron was going, I'll write it, I'll direct it, I'll do this, I'll do that. And within 15 minutes, you could hear phones ringing all over Hollywood as all the studios that Marvel had sold the rights to over and over and over again suddenly popped up.
Yeah. I remember this story when James Cameron wanted to do it. And then, of course, like classic James Cameron, just waited around too long and then walked away from the project.
I had the ideal the ideal person to play Storm, which was Angela Bassett.
Yes. Me too. I always casted her. Who did you cast as Cyclops back in the 90s?
I didn't get that far.
Michael Biehn.
I wanted.
Danny DeVito as Wolverine.
No. Actually, no.
I had to ask.
Bob Hoskins.
Bob Hoskins, really?
Yeah, because there's this dumbass movie with Tom Selleck called Lassiter, is the film, where Tom Selleck's a thief in London, pre-war. Hoskins is a cop, a chief inspector. And there's a moment where Selleck comes to his door and knocks on the door, and Hoskins opens it. And it's like, just looks up at Selleck, and his face just goes totally Bob Hoskins. And he just holds up his hands and just slams,
I never thought of Hoskins as Wolverine, but I guess I can say like a younger.
The essence of it. Yeah. He was younger at that point, but he slams Selleck back, and he goes, "You come to my house, wham! You come to my house, wham!" He says it 3 times and just pushes Tom Selleck all back down the path to the street and slams the gate. "Don't you ever come to my house!" And Selleck looked scared, and it was like, "Whoa, okay, that's Wolverine. That's cool." So my wish fulfillment scene is in Panther 2. There's this. There you see the Queen, Angela Bassett, and there's this huge storm raging outside, it's lightning and thunder, and they're trying to have a conference inside, and she finally just says, "Oh, bugger this!" Gets up, turns towards the door, yanks her hat off, or her headdress off, and you realize, wait a minute, that's not gray hair, and she just storms to the door, outside into the pouring rain, throws her arm up and says, "Enough!" And lightning explodes out of her hand up into the sky, and the storm, like, "Oh, sorry," just calms down and goes away. And as she turns around, winds swirl around her, and she's instantly dry, walks in and says, "That's better." So in my wish fulfillment it was T'Challa's father who went back and met and married Storm. Oh, okay. And so you've got T'Challa's son, T'Chaka's son, who is T'Challa, the Black Panther. But as Darth Vader would say, "Sister? You have a sister?" So not only is she a genius, but she's young Storm.
Oh, Shuri.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I figure, okay, we're there. Take that, Marvel Universe.
Well, I mean, they really could because they're doing their own thing.
But to me, because that way you bond together the two ideas that Storm has a connection, Aurora has a connection with Wakanda.
Right. And
that way you can hold to the idea that if we'd done this 30 years ago when Angela Bassett was... And also my visual of Aurora was actually the visual I'm doing of her in another story.
Oh, you're doing another story?
Yeah, but I can't talk about that one.
Sure you can.
No, I can't.
Off camera.
Is because I don't know if they're going to let me do it. But
You're Chris Claremont.
Well, the idea is the X-Men in the present day, the getting together in the present day. But what I had in mind is that she's not this ragamuffin from the sticks. When you see her, she is just as cool and stylish as you could get, because Africa is cool and stylish. But
absolutely,
what she does is she wears her hair in dreadlocks, totally bound in the way Angela Bassett did in Strange Days, except when she turns on her power. And when she turns on her power, the hair unwinds and gets very traditional Storm-like. And then when she turns off her power, it just binds itself up again.
You've really put a lot of thought into this.
I'm a sexist pig, and I like playing with my toys. But for me, I also think of it as like, it would be a really cool image for readers of both genders to look on. Because the thing I always felt the series needed and benefited from, as did the industry, is there are two conflicting genders involved here, and the one that aren't guys outnumber the one that is guys. That's an interesting way of putting it. It was more fun reaching out to them back in the day. The guys had enough heroes. I wanted to see if I could energize the female audience And I have to tell you that the most heartbreaking moment in those days is sitting at a post-convention party talking to this young woman who was in tears because she was Mormon, and while her husband had been totally willing to indulge her affectation to comic books while her children were babies, now that they were getting old enough to read, it was inappropriate material. So she was basically going to have to give it up, and she was heartbroken. And I'm sitting there thinking, holy cow. And one side of my brain is going, that is the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen. And the other side of my brain is going, yes! Because I'm a writer. I want people to be heartbroken when they're not reading the book. But that's the point is that why the hell can't you have women characters who reach out to the women audience? And I know it's incredibly arrogant and presumptuous of me to say something like that, being who I am as a guy. But on the other hand, when I was doing this, no one else was doing it, so I figured, screw it.
No, you put Storm in front of the X-Men, and she was powerless. She became the leader of the X-Men.
Yeah, but the whole, where that all grew out of was the women I knew. I mean, my mother had a fight with her mother back in the day. Oh, no, she wasn't, sorry. That was the original story, but the real story apparently was her boyfriend stood her up on a date. And she was pissed off and walking down the street, and there was this recruiting office saying, join the Royal Air Force. And there was a Spitfire, and my mom wanted to fly Spitfires. So she walked in and enlisted, and only after she'd signed the paper did the recruiting officer tell her, well, you're a woman or a girl, you're not allowed to fly fighter aircraft. So instead she ended up running a radar station on the South Coast, where, as I like to put it, day tourists would wander across the channel from the mainland and litter the countryside with their cast-offs, as it were. So she would call the local constabulary, who would fly up in Spitfires and Hurricanes and remonstrate with these rascals in no uncertain terms. Or, as more traditionally, the Luftwaffe came over, bombed the living shit out of the South Coast, and the RAF flew up and kicked their ass. And my mom got bombed a number of times in her radar station.
Your mom's a badass. No wonder you wrote so many badass women.
No. But I also have another friend who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, a Humboldt winner. She is one of the best investigative reporters I know. And the scariest thing is that her specialty was the Ebola virus. And a number of times back in the day, we'd get report of an outbreak in Africa, and she'd take her mop suit and catch a plane and be wandering up, into the boonies like a week later looking for it. I mean, and my best friend, trust me, there is nothing quite like waking up on a Sunday morning, listening to NPR, and hearing your best friend tell her reporter, Scott Simon, Scott, will you duck? They're shooting at us. And you hear the bullets go by. They were in Sarajevo, and it was not a happy time. And it's like, holy shit. And only after the mutual heart attacks does one realize, oh, wait, this isn't live. Even NPR isn't that dumbass. If they're airing it, everybody's okay. But it's still like, when you hear your best friend saying to her reporter, duck, they're shooting at us, and you hear the bullets, this is not, women, there are a lot of women's names on the wall in Washington. Yeah. There are, they take the same risks, they do the same job, they get a third of the pay. The same thing in superheroes. It's like, the women are not there to be eye candy as they were in the 60s. They are there to stand up alongside the men, to do cool stuff, to take the same risks or greater risks. And again, that was the whole point of the duel between powerless Aurora and Scott, to demonstrate yes, you have powers, but that also doesn't mean you're not vulnerable to the right attack in the right way and the right by the right person. But also to say, just because you don't have superpowers, A, you still look good in skin-tight leather, and B, that doesn't mean you can't find a way to win. And the whole point of the X-Men and the New Mutants and Excalibur and all the rest is no matter what the challenge, they will find a way to win, because that's their job. And to me, that was why there's a moment in the Nightcrawler story where he thinks this is Earth because he's in Berlin. There's a Berlin Wall. They've come back to the right dimension. Yeah. Except that Destiny's apparently running for her life. And the first time she sees him, she said, it's like, Kurt, my beloved, oh, wait, you can't be him. And, Chris goes, what? What? And as he explains to Kitty a little later, she called me beloved, but it wasn't like boyfriend beloved. It was like mom kid beloved. What the heck? Because this is Destiny.
Well, right.
But in my iteration, in the same Chris universe where Sabretooth is Logan's father, Destiny and Mystique are Rogue and Nightcrawler's parents. And that's why Mystique went kind of crazy, is that when Nightcrawler was born, she saw her real face in the kid, and she hadn't worn her real face in a long time, and it threw her for a loop. It's not taking this entirely seriously, but it's also having a lot of fun at the same time, and hoping if I'm having fun, the reader will have fun, but at the same time coming up with some interesting gotchas along the way.
Well, you got us a few times, so we're.
I'm not done yet.
No, I hope so. Where can people?
Will be a really cool surprise later in the year.
X-Men related? Wolverine related?
No, Wolverine has nothing to do with this, thank God. But it's a gotcha I think no one will see coming.
Oh, okay. Well, now you got me interested.
Oh, that's the idea.
You've always kept my interest.
No, this could be fun.
Well, I hate to wrap this up, but we're losing light here. Before we go, though, I do want to say I have been reading your comic books since I was a wee kid. And your comic books got me through a lot of rough times in my life. Even a kid, adulthood, no matter what, I always went back to X-Men because it felt like I was like I had a second family. And I know I say this because there's a lot of people that feel like that I didn't have a lot of friends growing up because of the language barrier, because I didn't know English. So comic books were my escape from reality. And it felt like every time I read X-Men, it was like a second family. And
that's very kind.
No, so thank you for everything, because I am who I am today because of your characters.
Well, I have to say, in all honesty, that I've been spending the last 3 years writing novels, only to discover, much to my chagrin, that I'm apparently at this point, not an effectively viable market source, because I'm not on not Facebook, Instagram. I signed up for Instagram some years ago, but I changed my my IP address since then, and it didn't transfer. So I'm so the idea is, this is the trouble. See, you have to understand, I come from an era when we used something you may not be familiar with, but it was called a typewriter, where you actually hit keys and the paper came out. You didn't have to go through a computer, which in those days was like about as big as this hall, which is very big. And if you've ever seen, and here goes the three, never mind. The three NASA, yeah. Yeah. Do you remember the title? Well, as you can see, they were you had Kevin Costner talking about an IBM the size of like the hall inside there, and that No, it was the latest IBM portable. But no, so I have to, but I've been working on novels, so you get to see if I'm as much fun without pictures as I am with.
I've read your First Flight novels.
Well, this is slightly different. It's they're set in the town of Crossroads, which anyone who read Sovereign 7 knows what I'm talking about. But Crossroads is a very strange place, and it involves a genie.
What's the name of the book?
Crossroads.
Crossroads. So check it out if you love Chris Claremont.
The series is Crossroads. The book is Gin Game.
Gin Game?
But I have to sell it first. So
okay.
What we have to do is start an enthusiastic,
Instagram. We need to join Instagram, Chris.
Well, no, I need to figure out how to use Instagram. You need to just go in there and tell the publishers, buy my book.
I have my PR person do that. I don't do Instagram either. It's these two ladies right here.
Well, could you tell him so he can tell me so we can...
So thank you very much for your time, sir. It has been a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine.
Seriously.
Sorry
thank
for
you.
all the foo bars.
No, not at all. Thank you so much. And this was Omar with Chris Claremont, my hero, my favorite writer of all time, signing off on Near Mint Condition.
So this is going to be cut down to 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, 2 or 3 minutes. A bunch of overlays of Hugh Jackman. We got it. We got kicked out of a place.
It's really nice to be here at C2E2 2018.
2019. That's okay. Redcon. We can fix that.
Wow, we've been here a long time. I can tap dance too.
Can you?
No, not anymore.
Oh. I was going to get that to do an outro. You can do the tap dance for us.
Yeah, not anymore.
I would be okay talking to you for a year.
No wonder they asked us to leave.
We got kicked out, Chris Claremont. I could say I got kicked out of a hotel with Chris Claremont now.
After a year?
That's awesome.
You guys still here? You've got to go.